Hello and welcome. We are a show that seeks to highlight and to speak about different topics regarding nutrition and behavior. I'm your host today, Terry Perkins, and we have an expert here, Mr. Craig Gordon. He has been in this business and research for over 44 years. He has experience in biochemistry, addiction, behavior, and disease. He also runs an organization called NEAD, which stands for Nutrition and Exercise versus Disease and Addiction and Disease. And our topic today is going to be the Great Masquerader. So Craig, what would you say the Great Masquerader is?
Thank you for your wonderful introduction. The Great Masquerader is something hiding in plain sight and you cannot see it clearly. So in this case, I'm talking about blood sugar disorders, sensitivities, allergies, a long list of different types of situations that people run across and they really don't quite understand it or pinpoint why this happens, why that happens, what's going on, what causes these things, and so forth. So what I'm saying is that blood glucose disorders are incredibly prevalent. We're getting in a lot of trouble with, our inability to identify them and understand how to take them seriously. So we have all sorts of different types of names for these. So we've got hypoglycemia, we've got hyperglycemia, we have hypo and hyperinsulinism, we have hypoadrenocorticism, we have insulin resistance, we have metabolic syndrome, we have type 1, 2, and 3 diabetes, and there's probably more. I'm not a doctor. I haven't studied this, all the technical stuff. What I do is I try to help people understand with broad strokes in simple language how this works and how it affects behavior and addiction and people and how it causes everything from disease to poor behavior to crime to violence to mental health issues and so forth.
So before we move on, speaking of simple terms, can you define what blood sugar is and why it's so important?
Blood glucose is your source of energy for thinking, being physical, and your general activity and all your body functions that you don't even really know are going on, but they're always going on. Like your lungs, like your breathing, like your skin is growing, your hair is growing, your salivary glands, your brain and all its different little incongruities. And so forth. And this is all taken for granted.
Right.
It's like, come on. It's not all that simple. And we shouldn't, what happens in America is most people treat their bodies like a garbage can. 58% or more of all Americans spend half of their food budget on all sorts of things you could buy in a gas station. Ultra-processed food and sugar and artificial sugar, and it goes on with the different insults that you could conveniently pick up and just hammer on anytime you want to go to a gas station. And there's 5 million gas stations all across the country?
And growing and counting.
Maybe more. Oh yeah. It's
Right.
massive business.
So we're on the topic of hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia. We have a slide that talks about the symptoms of hyperglycemia. So can you speak on that as well?
Well, you can see these are some of the most prevalent symptoms of hypoglycemia. These are just the first 8 or 9. Exhaustion, depression, anxiety, insomnia, forgetfulness, nervousness, constant worrying, irritability, headaches. And could you imagine getting poked mentally, physically, and spiritually by these and probably 100 more every day? how good would you feel? What would you want to do? And how I've broken it down over all these years is that we are all malnourished. It depends on to what degree. There is no perfect nutrition. And if you're not taking really good care of yourself, you're going to be uncomfortable or sometimes even miserable. And what do people do? They want to hit the easy button. They want to do something that's distractive. I call it a chemical or biochemical or behavioral vacation or distraction from feeling uncomfortable or miserable. So what is a distraction or a vacation from feeling uncomfortable? Well, it could be, it could be sports. It could be kicking the dog. It could be driving crazy. It could be eating a healthy meal or not. It could be, drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, vaping, my favorite. I think actually vaping is worse than cigarettes now. And of course, everybody's got that, backwards. It could be, it could be all sorts of different things. Getting in a fight with your spouse, causing a trouble about something that really isn't that important. It could be all sorts of things. And these are all distractions and vacations. And what most people kind of gravitate toward is chaos rather than peace and quiet. Sometimes they want to get in a fight rather than, acquiesce and take care of business and, and so forth.
Right, so let's reference our next slide as well, because it has a percentage there that I think will shock people. So slide number 2 references how 90% of the population is affected.
Well, that's a really, really large percentage of the population is affected by blood glucose disorders of various sorts. And most people don't know it. So since the day you're born in this country, we're born and raised to associate pain, pleasure, reward, behavior modification, and love with sugar and treats. One of my favorite signs is, please don't love your grandkids with sugar. How simple is that? And think of how a young person is always, you're 2 years old, and your grandma who walks on water gives you a lollipop or says, you're a good baby, or you're a good boy or good girl, here's your treat. And you're going, gaga, that sounds wonderful. And your only source of reference to life is hugs, kisses, and food.
Right.
And so it's all about those treats.
Right.
And we acclimate to these things over a lifetime. And then when you get a little older, it winds up being alcohol and drugs. Or sugarettes. I call cigarettes sugarettes. It could be the vaping. It could be the chew. It could be coffee. Coffee loaded with sugar. And I've seen people put upwards of 15 to 18 sugars in their coffee. It's like they start pouring the sugar. It's like, hi, how you doing? What's going on?
Not including the syrups that are already in there,
They put flavorings, they put sugar, they put, and then the dairy product, another highly debatable item.
So let's move on to diabetes. I want to make sure we have time because that's a huge topic within itself.
Well, first you got to look at pre-diabetes. Okay. So there's the metabolic syndrome, there's hypoglycemia, hypoglycemia, and the different glycemia registries or descriptions of how your body processes glucose. And then what are the net reactions? Remember the sign we did with the exhaustion, the depression, the insomnia, the irritability? Those are all very common psychiatric maladies and issues that people are bringing, like almost bringing on themselves with poor nutrition. And this is especially important with kids because they're having a hard time doing their schoolwork and sitting still. and doing what they're supposed to do, their brains are in sugar shock.
That's a good time to bring in your 2009 study.
So in England, they did a study for 40 years, 17,500 subjects,
Wow.
7 massive data gatherings by very, very astute scientists following all the protocols. And by the end of 37 years or so, and it took 2 years to put it all together after that in 2009, this huge study that they never would have done in America because it's pointing the finger at sugar, talked about, and this is the only study I ever paid $9 for on the internet to get a 2-page summary. Only one in my history. So the conclusion was there is as they say it in England, there is a robust relationship between childhood confectionery consumption and adult aggression and violence. That was their conclusion over 40 years of this study, this massive study. So I'll say that again. There is a robust relationship between childhood confectionery consumption and adult violence and aggression.
So there's studies on there.
So there's so many studies on this, but nobody has the money to advance them to the public. They don't want to. They are not paid to do it. If they can't monetize it, they're not interested.
Right.
So that brings me to, before that, the list of symptoms goes on with hypoglycemia. And then we have metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is 2 or more of the following: high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, high cholesterol, smoking, obesity, and now sedentary, because people that aren't getting exercise are doing as much damage to their bodies as they do smoking cigarettes.
Wow. People need to hear that.
They don't get it. They need to move. They need to oxygenate their blood.
Right.
They need to move that oxygen through their body, through their blood, to their extremities, and make their body work like it was intended, like nature intended. This has nothing to do with me. I'm just like the side on the side, being the umpire, doing observational and calling balls and strikes as I see them. And now I'm a trained guy for 44 years, a little time seeing the same thing. I've done work for the White House on drug abuse policy. I've written all sorts of things. And, you know, I've been the one studying this stuff since I was 22. I'm 66. So the list goes on and on. Difficulty in concentration, cold hands and feet, mental confusion, chronic indigestion, heart palpitations, sweating, vertigo, constant worrying, cravings for sweets, moodiness, allergies, uncoordination, and so forth. And that's the short list. So do we need to suffer from all these problems because we think it's okay to eat a lot of sugar and not pay attention to nutrition?
Right.
I don't think so. I think you all deserve better. Very simple. So, we're walking right into it. We don't have to. We don't need to. There's no reason. And, the reason we do it so much is because big food, beverage, and pharma are dependent on our bad habits for their income. So they spend mountains of money. In fact, they spend disproportionate money marketing to blacks and Hispanics. That means extra money to get them to buy their products. Any which way they can, they will try to suck you in to buy their products, and then they're addictive, and you keep buying them. So here we go again. You know, it's all about money, not about health, not about fitness, not about families, not about kids. We need to do something. We need to do better.
Right. So getting back to diabetes, we started with prediabetes, and then we know that there's type 1, 2, and 3. So let's get more into that.
So there are forms of diabetes you can almost inherit, you get as a child. They call that type 1 diabetes. The names for diabetes are changing as the field of endocrinology evolves, and they learn more and they get comfortable with it, and then they try to share it and educate the public best they can. So there's type 1, to me, is childhood, or something before you're 20 years old. So that is that basically your pancreas shuts down, and you're now exhibiting different issues, and you have to have insulin from an artificial source. So there's type 1. Type 2 is something that we invite upon ourselves. Between the influence of big food, beverage, and pharma, and the availability of all this crap, then our families are so ridden with it. Whenever you get together, it's like a food fest.
Right.
The great American pastime used to be baseball 100 years ago. And now it's you go to the baseball game and it's more about the food and the drink.
Right. It's
like, you're kidding me. No. And then everybody goes to the park and the different like Sherwood Island, mobs and mobs of people. All they do is grill food and eat a lot of stuff that's really mostly garbage. And that's how they celebrate life. That's how they chill out. That's how they relax. And, when is anybody going to get serious about their health?
Right.
What has to happen first? Do they have to see somebody die in front of them? Do they have to see their relative get their foot, amputated, or they go blind, or this or that, with all the different ancillary problems that arise from blood glucose disorders? And how long can you take that? Where's the advantage to that when you could be eating simple, clean, healthy food and drinking water and being grateful and getting exercise, and your body responds, so your brain responds. Right. So then your reality changes, and maybe you're being a bit more productive, and things are going more smoothly at school or at home. And slowly things change according to how careful you are and how consistent you are. Very simple. So let's move on to type 3 diabetes. That's the one I know.
Are you pretty
ready?
New. Yeah.
Type 3 diabetes I started learning about literally 10 years ago. And hardly anybody knew about it. I was talking about it, and they're going, what? And these are health educators, these are doctors, these are nurses, these are school counselors, these are all sorts of people. Said, did you ever hear of type 3 diabetes? So you know what that is? That's dementia and Alzheimer's. 80% of people that show up with Alzheimer's are diabetic. Don't believe me. Google it yourself. You tell me. And so it makes sense. Now, the explanation for that is that your body is no longer producing enough insulin naturally. And from what I'm told, your hypothalamus, this little part of your brain that's responsible for memory, isn't getting a minute amount of insulin on a daily basis for a long time, so that it functions properly. How exactly it works, I couldn't tell you. But that's the long and the short of it, the street version. You're not getting the insulin, your blood sugar metabolism screwed up like usual, and you slowly start losing your memory. I know my memory is not what it used to be.
Mine either.
You know, and so we're carpet bombed with information every day,
Right.
and half of it's to get you to sell something or to buy something rather. And you know, and these people don't care about you or me or families or kids. They just want to sell something. So we have to be the you know, food detectives. We have to like focus on what we're doing.
Right.
So literally half to 1/3 to half of all adults in this country or more suffer from metabolic syndrome. This is the National Institute of Health, not Craig's opinion. This is a big deal. This is a research deal. These are broad statements made by the National Institute of Health. Then there's, you know, something I say about how if you take care of yourself, your level of health and fitness is your real IQ test. It will predict your future. It will predict how well you do in your life.
Yeah.
And this is not rocket science. You don't have to be that smart to understand this. You know, we need to just basically take care of ourselves,
Right.
have some ethics and respect for our own body / mind, because the body and the mind are one unit. They're not separate.
Right. And even so, it's not just you, it passes on to your children, or it affects, you
Well,
know,
it does. All
people
sorts
as well.
of behaviors and isms,
Right.
addictions, chemistries, you know, even your immune function. If you don't eat healthy and you're eating a lot of sugar and drinking a lot of garbage, it affects your immune system. So what happens? You get more sick more often and earlier in your life. Duh! You know, it's like, come on, campers. We can do better than this. This is not that hard to understand. I'm no better than anybody else. I'm just the guy who said, this has to stop.
Right.
We need to take this seriously. Let's do something about it now rather than later, after we have to, you know.
Well, it's too late.
Well, it is too late, because once you have metabolic syndrome,
Right.
which is more common than houseflies, you're probably going to get chronic disease a day, a week, a year, or 2 years later. You've got a chronic disease
If you don't change.
if you don't get healthy while the getting is good.
Right. So we have a slide that kind of speaks on how sugar paralyzes the immune function, and I feel like that speaks to what you were saying as
Okay.
well. It's our 4th slide.
Well, how about this, campers? Sugar paralyzes immune function. Cancer and disease lurk unopposed. So what do you think that means? If you eat poorly and don't hydrate properly with water, you are suppressing your own immune system, and you get sick more often and earlier. We need our immune systems in the very worst way to function at a high level to prevent us from getting sick. And this is not just a little sick. This isn't like a cold or a sniffle. This is cancer. This is diabetes. This is heart disease.
Well, what is
strokes.
diabetes?
What is diabetes? Well, that's a good question. Diabetes is a word that I don't think I coined it, but I love it. It turns out that 85 to 90% of people that are obese or morbidly obese, pardon me, let me back up. It turns out that diabetics, 85 to 90% of diabetics are obese or overweight. And so, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That if you're carrying extra weight, the chances of you being pre-diabetic or diabetic are way up. Is that a good idea? Probably not. You know, my friend invented a tape that you put around your stomach. For men, around your belly button, you should be 40 inches.
Okay.
I'm right about 40 inches. I have to work on it. For Women, it's 35 inches. So these are danger zones if you're over that limit for men and women. And so it's an interesting thing where you can actually measure your progress. And there's so much that we could do that we don't bother to even think about. So, good question.
Thank you.
Did that answer it?
That did answer it, yes.
Okay.
I want us to make sure that we recap everything and then get into some positivity, some encouragement as well.
So we learned about the different names for blood sugar disorders. I call them disorders, allergies, or sensitivities. We learned about why, because big food, beverage, and pharma are dependent on our poor choices, and they make them readily available. They try to make them cheap. They always make a big profit.
Right.
And they don't care about us. We have to care about us. So it behooves us to really shop around the outside of a store, learn to cook, learn to buy vegetables and prepare food, learn to bring food with you so you know what you're eating during the day, and drink lots of water and be grateful about it. So here's one. Do you want your freedom as you age? You do it now or pay 20 times the cost later. For instance, you could have great insurance and you could still go medically bankrupt from the amount of money it costs for a heart attack, for years and years of diabetes that's unchecked and untreated. Even for something simple like losing a toe could cost upwards of $50,000 for an amputation.
That's crazy.
And when you get to advanced diabetes and you're still smoking, duh, and you're still drinking, double duh, because you know what alcohol is, it's sugar. It's magnified sugar. These things are a disaster area for your lifespan and what you're supposed to be doing to take care of yourself.
So what are some things people can do to take care of themselves? What positivity can we end off on?
Well, we can learn more about nutrition. We can get a whole lot more serious about regular exercise, even if it's walking start with a minute a day and work toward 20 minutes twice a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, like you're late for the train, which is a phenomenal prescription for exercise. I try to do at least an hour of walking a day. I don't always do it, but I try. It's better if you break it up morning and evening. And it could be other types of activities or exercise that get your blood flowing. Raise your blood pressure naturally with exercise rather than drama and cigarettes and sugar and alcohol and all the other exacerbators or excitation sources that you don't need and you don't want.
So we have about a minute left, and we have one last quote. I want to put that up shortly just because it's a Winston Churchill quote that I feel is right on topic for us. But after we see that, we're just going to close it down and talk about NEAD a little bit.
Well, there's diabetes. Will either open or close your eyes. And this is a systemic killer we need to take seriously. So, next slide.
Yep, and that's our Winston Churchill quote, slide number 7.
Here's Winston Churchill, who's supposed to be one of our great leaders of all time. My real concern is not with taking action, but inaction. It has to change. You need to consider changing. So beside that.
So thank you so much, Craig. That was a really, really informative show. We will be back with our next episode, which is going to be talking about crime and nutrition again. So thank you so much. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you for